Hello guys, today we will look into the scraping features and scraping functions of the ExBrowser plugin. Before we start, just as a quick refresh. So there are three ways you can identify elements and select stuff you want to scrape with the ExBrowser plugin. You can use the Element Selector, and that's identical to the one you might already know from the Ubot Studio browser. We can use CSS selectors, and I will show you that in a minute. And we can use XPath, which is my preferred way of doing that because it's the most flexible way. And yeah, I mean, you can automate that a bit, and I will show you that in a second as well. So just as a quick refresh, with the Ubot browser, you have something called a scrape attribute, right? And there are a couple of scrape functions in Ubot Studio. If you look at that, you can page scrape attribute, and then we have all the element functions like element child, element from text, element offset, and so on. And we'll not go into that today because I started using XPath a while ago, and I find it a lot easier than those element parent child offset things, because well, that's only you only have that in Ubot Studio, right? And XPath is a lot more universal, so you can use that if you move to another language like .NET, C# or something like that. You can use XPath there as well, or in Python and other languages, right? So it's if you learn that, it's a lot more universal, right? You can use that in a lot of other scenarios as well. If you get your head around how that Ubot thing works, it's great. And you already know that, right? I used it a lot in the past, right? And it's a bit, to first understand it with how that parent, the sibling child thing really works. It's a bit confusing, and even if you build it together, it looks really, really strange, right? You have some parents with sibling child and everything mixed together sometimes. So but that's might be a personal thing, I find XPath a lot easier to understand, right? And to work with. So, but as a refresh, how does that work? Scraping attribute, right? We have that nice little element creator here. So this is a nice thing. You don't have that in the ExBrowser plugin, just because of some of the API limits. So it's not as easy to do as the Ubot guys do it when they implement it directly, right? But we can use this function to build the element, the scrape element text here, right? And then just copy that over to ExBrowser because it works exactly the same. So you can create your bot and work with the Ubot browser and create everything, right? Identify elements. Let's say we want to identify that button here. I use that element identify element thing here from Ubot Studio, right? I can look into the code and maybe find a better way of identifying that via the title, download Ubot Studio, whatever, right? So I select that one, inner text, download now, so that's fine, right? So I get that one, what I want to scrape, href, for example, right? So now I have my scrape attribute text here, my element, right? And I can use that the same thing here, and I can move it over to the ExBrowser selector, and we will do that in a second. So before we look into that, I would like to explain the different scrape commands, or better, scrape functions we have in the ExBrowser plugin. There are 4 functions, right? And they have different tasks, but they all do basically the same thing. So we have the scrape function here, and we have the scrape list function. The important thing is the scrape functions, both of them, scrape element and scrape element attribute, they will both always only return one result. So if, for example, there are multiple buttons in this example, like multiple download buttons on that page, and they all have different href, different URLs, and you want to scrape all of them, this does not work, right? Because scrape element and scrape element attribute will always only return one result, the first one it finds. Right? With XPath, for example, you can there are ways to tell them that you want the fifth or the second, for example, right? But it will always only return one result, no matter how many matches you have on that side, right? So that's very important. The scrape list element, both of them, they will always return a list, everything. You can add that list into a variable, right? Like here, right? Just use that function here and use the set command to add that stuff to a variable. Yeah, you can do that. But the nice thing with the ExBrowser function here is that this directly returns a list object. So that means you can directly use that command and add it to a list. And just do a quick example here. Add list to list. I can directly use that command here, right, as the list to add. Normally you normally would do something like list from text, right, and then you add your other function, and then you do you put new line in here, right, something like that. So that's the normal way. If a scraping function would only return text, right, then you have to use that list from text function. But that's not the case. That's not the case here with this, because you can directly use the scrape list element and scrape list elements and add it to a list, which is very, very nice. So now, scrape element and scrape element attribute, they both only return one result, and scrape list elements and scrape list elements attribute, they both return a list, right? If there's more than one, they will return all of them. So the difference between scrape element and the difference between the normal one and the one with attribute here at the end is that scrape element and scrape list elements, they will always return inner text. Right? So they will always return inner text. It's not like this scrape function here. The regular Ubot scrape attribute function, here you can specify what attribute you want to scrape, right? You have a drop down, and so they have it all in one function. So you can select inner text, or you can select something like href, right? The ExBrowser functions, they have it separated. So if you want inner text, you have to use scrape element or scrape list element. If you want something else, whatever, another attribute that is not inner text, like href, id, whatever, you have to use the attribute functions. Right, so that's very important to understand. And that's one of the things where you will see different implementations in Ubot Studio. So see, even with XPath, right? If you use HTTP plugin, it works a bit different to the ExBrowser plugin. Or if you use the large data plugin, which also has an XPath function, that also works different. So you always have to look into the details, right? So here with ExBrowser plugin, just as a refresh, if you want inner text, you use scrape element or scrape list element, depending on if you want just one result or a list. And if you need another attribute, like href or something else, you will use scrape element attribute and scrape list elements attribute. Right? That's very, very important to understand. So it's not possible to use scrape element attribute and then say inner text as the attribute. Right? That will not work. At least it didn't work for me. So, right, for inner text, use this one. For everything else, use the attribute one. Very, very important to understand that. So that's the reason why you have four functions. Of course, that could be built into just two, right? Just add inner text as an option to the attribute one. but the creators of CBrowser plugin, they thought that it's easier for people if they want inner text, just use this one, and if they want something else, then use that one. Because with the scrape element and scrape list element, you don't have to specify an attribute, right? It just works. You specify the expression, and it will directly return the results. So yeah, it's a bit simpler, but you have to know what the difference is. Okay, so let's look into that. Move over to CBrowser elements. So what are we doing here? We, of course, I clear the data. It's a new command in the last Ubot Studio update, which will just delete all the variables, lists, and tables. Then we use a CBrowser container. So that's always, if you work with the CBrowser, that's where everything starts. So all the commands and everything, they are within a CBrowser container. If you use threads, or if you want to change the proxy server, then of course you will probably put that into a define command and then call it from the outside and hand over the proxy details to that define. But that's something we will cover in one of the other tutorials probably. So here we have a CBrowser container. If you want to specify an option like the user agent in our example here, there you have the options functions, CBrowser options functions here on the left side, and I use that CBrowser set user agent. That function goes into that options field here, and I just specify the latest Chrome browser user agent, right? So then we have a CBrowser navigate, which just goes to the same site I was using here in the Ubot Studio browser. I have a wait for DOM ready that waits until everything is loaded. Also here, I recommend that when you work with a bit more complicated pages, that you use the CBrowser wait for element, right? The flow command. So if you want to extract something like we do here, I could also use CBrowser wait element and then just wait for the element I want to scrape, right? Just to ensure that it's really there, right? But be careful, if there's more than one, this event will trigger as soon as the first one is showing up on that page. So if you want to scrape more than one, yeah, right, it could be that the page is still loading, but that the event continues. So I would normally always use both, right? I would use the wait for DOM ready, and then I would use the wait for element, just to ensure that the element I'm waiting for, because I want to extract it or use it or change it, whatever, is really there, right? So now, as you can see here, I'm using the same element description I used for Ubot Studio browser, right? That's exactly the same. So you can directly copy that over, right? So let's do that here. Inner text, download now. So I use that one, and then download now. So what are we doing here now? Just a second, I'm changing that from my previous example. So we navigate to the site, we wait until it's loaded, we check that the element we want to work with is really there. Then I use the browser scrape element, which will return inner text into the tmp1 variable, and then I will use scrape element attribute with href, and we'll put that into the tmp2 variable. So let's run that. It will open the browser. I'll navigate to that page, right? Extract the data and closes. So let's look at the debugger. And here we have it. So one result, one in tmp1, which is download now, which is the inner text, of course, right? And the URL, the href attribute we extract from that element. So it works exactly the same way as the scrape element attribute function of Ubot Studio, of the Ubot Studio browser, right? So you can create it in with the Ubot Studio commands, right? All the scrape attributes, and then just move it over to CBrowser plugin to get more stability, right? Because that's the main reason why you use CBrowser, the CBrowser plugin and the CBrowser container, so that you can use an external browser like Chrome or Firefox or the built-in Phantom GS thing, right? to get more stability. That's the main reason. Otherwise, you could just use the Ubot Studio browser. And I mean, to be honest, if you only have some simple tasks here, load one side and get one data point out of one side or something like that, I mean, I would still use the Ubot Studio browser. It works fine for a lot of use cases, but for a lot of use cases, when you run threads or you do a lot of stuff or you load heavy pages with a lot of data on it and scripts and stuff, then of course the C browser plugin with the C browser browser is a lot more stable. So yeah, I highly recommend you use that for the more serious work. Right. And if you sell that bot, I mean, the size of the bot will increase a bit because you have to compile the plugin into that bot. And the plugin has around about 10 megabyte or something like that. So the bot size will increase a bit, but it's really worth it because it's a lot more stable. So now, of course, I think I don't have to show the other two functions here, right? I mean, the scrape list element and scrape list elements attribute, that they work exactly the same, right? They will just return a list, and will probably only return one thing because on that page there's only one button with download now in it, so that will not change anything. But if there's more data like the href links, you can use the scrape list elements and scrape list elements attribute to extract that stuff. And we will see both of those commands in action with the expat functions here at the end, of course. But for now, I think you get the point. So let's move over to CSS selectors. CSS selectors, the commands are exactly the same. So the only difference is, as I mentioned, the 4 scrape functions from the C browser plugin, they all support 3 things. They support native elements. That's what we used here, right? There you don't have to specify anything else. You just put in the element expression like inner text equals and so on, as you can see here, right? If you want to use CSS, you have to put C: in front of it, right? And for CSS, for expat, you have to put X: in front of it. So that will tell the element function to use CSS selector or expat, and if nothing is there, the element function will expect a native element expression, right? So as you can see here, there are some more functions who use element selectors. So it's not only the scrape functions down here, we also have stuff up here like change attribute, change checkbox, change dropdown, right? And they all have element selectors, right? Click something, they all have element selectors. Type text, another one. They all have element selectors, right? And all of them work the same way. They all support all 3 ways, right? They all support the normal regular element selector thing from Ubot. They support CSS and they support expat. All of them, all the same, right? And for all of them, you have to put in C: if you want to use CSS, and X: if you want to use expat, and nothing if you want to use the poor attribute element format from Ubot Studio, right? So keep that in mind. I'm just using the scrape functions for the main part of the demo here. So now, to be honest, I never had a use case where I had to use the CSS selectors. I don't know about you. Maybe you have a special use case for that, but this is just a regular CSS selector. So there is a nice website out there where you can just take a look at the different CSS selectors that are available. And let's take a quick look at that site. So here it is. That's w3school.com, CSS reference, CSS selector reference, and there you can see the different ways how to select something, right? Not going into those details now. I think you can probably figure that one out on your own. So what are we doing here now? Here we're using the Chrome browser. We will navigate to Bing. We will type text into the ID, into the element with the ID sp_form_q, right, which is the query box. We will type the text, my first external browser search, and we will click the element with the ID sp_form_go, right? So that's what we do. Of course, you could also use an element selector here, the regular one we covered in the previous example, or we could use XPath as well, right? Of course, both works. Let's take a quick look. So it will open the browser. It already entered my first external browser search. Click the button and closes it. So not really a lot to that, right? It's just another way to select the elements and to specify the elements. I don't know really why this is also here in the plugin. Maybe there was some special requirement for that, or it's for HTML people, right? Web developers who already know how that CSS selector stuff works, right? So if that's you and you already know all of them out of your head, then this is great. Of course, you know how to build them, right? You can directly use it here with the ExBrowser plugin. So, but I'm more into XPath, and I'm not really using that. So to be honest. Okay, so the next one, let's take a look at XPath. And here we will create a completely new example to show it to you. So in this example, we will take a look at yellowpages.com and try to automate that a bit. So I'm putting in a ExBrowser container here, and we'll copy over that ExBrowser set user agent function from here, so that I don't have to do that all over again. The navigate command, and have that here, yellow pages, and we wait for DOM ready. And here we go. So if you want to keep that ExBrowser window open, just use an alert at the end, right? Because it will show a pop-up, and until that's before, you have to click that pop-up away so that the browser closes. So let's quickly run that quickly. Go to Yellow Pages, and it's loaded. And here's my pop-up. Okay, so this is working fine. So now I want to type some text into a field, right? I want to search for plumber, and I want to specify and I want to select that element via XPath. So to choose XPath, I have to type X : here, and now I have to write my XPath expression. So I'm a bit lazy, and I created a nice little tool to do that. XPath Builder Pro, you might have heard about that already, or you might see that in the forum very soon when we launch that. But this simplifies the whole thing. Yeah? You can create the XPath expression manually on your own, of course, but you can do it with that builder here as well. So I open that page and I move my mouse over that box, and I right click and say select element to builder. I look for some unique stuff like ID equals query, say attribute equals string. Hit the test button, and it only selects one element here. So copy that over, back to Ubot, and I use that here directly. So let's test that very quickly. Okay, so here we go. As you can see, it typed plumber into that field, right? And now we have to click that search button and probably change that. Yeah, well, that's fine. and hit that search button. So the next thing I have to figure out is the element for that button. So ExBrowser click is my next command, and back to Expert Builder Pro, I want the expert expression for that element. So element to builder, type submit equals string tested one element, and here we go. Take that one, copy that into my ExBrowser command here, and that's it. Let's run that. Go to Yellow Pages, load the site. Oh yeah, okay, of course. So this is the error you will get when you forget to put the X:" in front of the element, right? As you see here, because then all the element functions and commands, they expect regular element expressions from like the Ubot Studio ones, right? So of course, just forgot to add that here. X:. All right, run it again. Plumber, and it clicked that button, right? So that's it. Now we are on that page here. So let's say I now want to scrape some data. Going back to my expat builder, enter plumber, right? Hit that search button. So the site will come up. Now we have all the different results here. So let's take a look at one of those. Right click it, element to builder. So it has some nice hrefs here in that, right? All the links. Let's take a look at some of the others. Nationwide and so on. So let's just say I want all the links that are on the page now, right? You can of course filter that a bit, and then say diff data analytics, and figure out the right way to extract that data. Yeah, but we will not look into that at the moment. Or maybe that's a better example. Let's take the website here. Let's click website, and okay, here we have it. Okay, so I want all the href links where inner text contains website. So let's do that. I select website here, hit contains, it automatically builds my expat expression. So now I want to extract just for testing href, right? Okay, here I have all the different links, right? So those are all the different external sites. So I now want to use that with my Ubot function. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add that to a list. So add list to list. URLs. I want, of course, a scraper list, and I don't want the inner text. I want an attribute. I want the href attribute. So I have to use that scrape list elements attribute function here. Put that in. So. And then move back to Expert Builder. So this part was just for testing. I use the Element Selector. Element to scrape, don't forget to put X: in front of it. I put that Element Selector, and the attribute I want to extract is href. I add that here. And yeah, we delete duplicates, that's fine. And yeah, that should do the job, so let's run it. Okay, so let's take a look at the debugger. And here, as you can see, we have 23 items in our URLs list. Now, all the different URLs, right? So, of course, you can filter that stuff and optimize your expat query and so on. So that was just a very, very quick example to extract some of that stuff. Yeah, I think that's enough for today, and that should give you a very good overview about how that scraping stuff works with ExBrowser plugin and Ubot Studio. Yeah, if something is unclear, right, or you need more information about how to scrape with ExBrowser plugin, just let me know, and yeah, I might do another tutorial on that. So thanks a lot, and have a nice day.